Hello and welcome to JavaScript Evangelist. This video is part of Learn Angular 4 step-by-step series and you're watching Angular and Firebase Authentication part 2. In the previous video, we created a login page and some dummy components needed for our authentication. Today's video will set up Firebase Authentication at Firebase console. As well, set up the authentication service using AngularFire for our login page, as well as learn about AngularFire authState. Okay, as you know, in the previous video, inside the login component TypeScript file, I commented out some code. So I mentioned that this is how I'm expecting the auth service to be. We haven't created the auth service yet, so let's get started. Just to mention you can read more about AngularFire authentication at this link. So I'll be sharing this link to you in the description of the video. You'll be able to know what has changed in respect to Angular 4. And okay, let's head over to Firebase console. Just go to the console. So once you are at the Firebase console, open your application, go to authentication, and just add a dummy user. I have added 2 dummy users. Both the passwords is 1234556. And you can see both the users randomly gets a UID from Firebase. Also enable the sign-in methods. So I have just enabled email and password, as well I have enabled Google authentication, and hit save. All right. Once you are done with this, just close the Firebase console. We don't need it anymore. Okay. Now what we are going to need to do it is first let's get started with the authentication service. All right, so let's get started by creating the service, but there is something missing. Go to your Angular's app module file. Since we are using AngularFire authentication, as you can see at this link, they have specifically mentioned that you have to inject the AngularFireAuth module. So we are just going to do that. So go to your app module. Then just add AngularFireAuth module, and once we have injected AngularFireAuth module, you need to go to AngularFire initialize, and you can see AngularFire database module. After that, just insert the AngularFireAuth module, and that's it. We have successfully injected the authentication module for the AngularFire. Close the module file. Now we are going to generate the auth service, ng generate service, and the service name is going to be auth service. But I want to create this service inside my shared folder. So inside shared, I have created another folder called auth. It's empty folder. Inside this auth folder, I'm going to generate my service called auth service. So I'm going to give it a path shared/auth, and my service name is going to be auth service, and hit enter. And as a warning from the Angular CLI, service is generated but not provided. So of course, as you have learned from the previous video about Angular's authentication, we have to, once we have generated the service, we have to also inject it inside the ng module under the app module providers. Once you copy paste the class name, just inside the WebStorm, press Alt Enter, and it will get added. So this shortcut is available only for the WebStorm IDE. All right. So I'm just going to close this. Go to the auth service file. So now I'm inside auth service TypeScript file. So I'm going to inject the AngularFire auth service as AF auth. We have injected AngularFire service inside our constructor of our auth service. Also, before we create the login function, I'm going to create another function. So this is going to be a public method available to our auth service that is going to be login with Google. So if you hit on a button, so basically I'm just going to open the login component. Let's say below this form, I'm going to have another div login with Google, and inside our login component, I'm going to add one more function. This login with Google will invoke this function from our auth service, login with Google. And this login with Google function is basically this .af auth and sign in with pop-up. And this sign in with pop-up is going to leverage the actual Firebase SDK's Google auth provider. So we have to inject the actual Firebase SDK. You can read more about sign in with pop-up at the given URL in the description. So I'm just going to inject Firebase SDK. Make sure you had installed Firebase at the beginning of the session. I've also a video on how to set up and install Firebase and AngularFire with Angular project. And so now I'm going to leverage Firebase SDK. So I'm going to invoke the Google auth provider. So you have to type new Firebase.auth.Google auth provider, and basically this doesn't accept anything yet. So all it does is it pop-ups a Google authentication. So we have to just invoke this over here. To do that, of course, we need to inject the auth service. So I'm going to inject the auth service as auth service, and it's going to be auth service. I'm going to invoke the Google function. So this .auth service .login with Google. So once this function gets invoked, and I'm just going to call this over here on the click of the button. And if you head over to the login page, you can see there is one more button over here called login with Google. I'm not going to go completely with the login yet, but you can see it pop-ups a Google model. I'm not going to select any of my accounts, but yeah, you get an idea how to do an Google authentication. And I'm just going to close this. You do get a promise, and as you can see, this is the promise which we received since the user closed the modal. And that's how you do authentication with Google login. But now I'm going to go back to our main concept of our today's video, that is login with email and password. So as you know, we have already added a test user inside our Firebase console. We are going to use that only. But before, we have to add the public API for the login inside the auth service. So I'm going to add one more function over here called login, and login accepts email and password. As you can see, the same function we are going to utilize inside our login component, which is kind of over here. And as you can see, auth service.login, we are inserting the input. We are going to call the AngularFireAuth service.auth. And instead of calling sign in with pop-up, we are going to call it sign in with email and password, which accepts email and password. This AngularFireAuth sign in with email and password returns us a promise, but we are not using promises anymore. Instead, we are dealing with observables inside our project. So I'm expecting that I'm going to receive an observable. Okay, so I want to return an observable of type any at the moment. So I'm going to remove this line and I'm going to return observable. So basically I'm going to convert the promise into an observable. So observable has a method called from promise. So I have to pass this promise over here, which gets converted into an observable. But make sure you have injected from promise method into your main file, main.typescript file, from promise method over here, so that we can use it inside our auth service. That's it with login. Now I'm going to call this login method inside our login component. So simply, since we already have the auth service injected inside our login component TypeScript file. I'm just going to call this .auth service .login, and login accepts email and password. So we have to pass it over here like this. We have to subscribe to this as well, since this is an observable. So I'm just going to subscribe. Inside the subscription, we get success and error. So if it's a success, we have to navigate the user to the blog posts. So let's do that. I'm going to inject the router service, router, and router has a method called navigate. So if it is a success, this .router .navigate / posts route, and if it's an error, I'm just going to do for now just an alert. So alert the error. You could simply just remove everything, and you can do it like this also, but I would like to be a little bit descriptive over here. So let's say if this works, I'm just going to refresh over here. I'm just going to log in with test@gmail.com, and the password is 123456. Okay, let's log in and see if it's working fine. Alright, it works. And my Chrome is even asking me to if you want to save this username and password or not. Alright, so we are successfully logged in, but how do we know if we really logged in or not? Like, how do we know what is the current user? Yes, I'm going to come to that part now. So if you go to the login, user is still able to log in. So what I want now is, if I'm logged in, I want to hide this login and register buttons and instead show a logout option over here. So let's go back to the auth service. Fire provides us a neat subscription subject event. So AngularFire service provides us a neat authState. So authState is basically a kind of a behavior subject inside the observables. So we have to define a user. So we have to define a user who is going to hold the authState. So once you log in, if it's a success, the user automatically gets the authState. But for that, first we have to define a variable who is going to get the authState. So inside the constructor of the auth service, I'm going to create. So basically I have to first of all create a public user which will be exposed outside this service. So I'm going to mention the user is going to be a type of observable, and which is going to be a type of Firebase user, and the same user gets the authState over here, AngularFireAuth.authState. So if this doesn't make any sense to you, make sure to watch my Angular's observable behavior subject video on this same subject. Alright, so we have the behavior subject user, that is an authState. Once you log in, the user automatically gets the authState. So let's see if this is really working. So I'm going to call this user inside our login component, and I'm going to define my own user over here, which is going to be a user $. So $ denotes that this is going to be an observable. This dot auth service dot user. So we get the user. So since we have this user, why not let's see if it's actually working. So as you already know, we have already logged in, right? So let's see if this guy is really available to us or not. And I'm going to just load it as a sync. I'm going to display it as a JSON. Alright, since you already know that we logged in over here, and as you can see, it's already displaying me all the information about the current logged in user. Even though we are at the login page, don't worry about that. We are going to deal with that very soon. Alright, since we logged in, we have the user's auth state. Now I'm going to add one more function inside the auth service. It's going to be a handy function for us. So basically, what I want is every time, instead of writing a function to check if a user is logged in or not, I'm going to write a function. Is authenticated. So I'm going to subscribe to this function is authenticated, and it will tell me if user is logged in or not. So which will return me an observable of type boolean. I'm just going to subscribe to the user. Since user is an observable, observable gets a method called map. So we get a user. Whenever we get this user, and so basically whenever we get this user, if the user is available, and if user dot uid, if user.uid is not equal to undefined, that means this is true and it will return us an boolean that is true. If it is not logged in, it will return us false. All right, so the main objective right now for us is, if the user is logged in, we are going to hide the login and register buttons, and instead we are going to show a logout button. So let's just go to our navigation now. So inside the navigation component, I'm going to listen for the authentication. We can create a public variable over here called is logged in, and this will it will receive an observable of boolean. So inside the constructor, first of all we'll need to load the auth service, and I'm going to load auth service, and inside the constructor itself I'm going to subscribe to the auth service is authenticated dot subscribe. If it's a success, to tell you we are going to receive success every time, because if the user is not present, this function will return us false. So every time we are going to receive a success, but the success will contain either true or either false. So this dot is logged in is equal to success, which is going to be a boolean. All right, that's it. So if this is logged in, we have to hide inside the navigation component HTML, we have to hide the login and register buttons. So it's simple. We are going to use the ngIf over here. So basically this is going to be a reverse of that. If this is not logged in, we are going to show the login. Just copy this, and one more button. If user is logged in, I'm going to show a logout button, and let's see if it works, and refresh. All right, so works perfectly. So as you can see, if I'm logged in, I get to see the logout button. Logout button is very simple. Go back to the component again, and I'm just going to call this as logout. So on logout, this simply calls this dot auth service dot logout, which is yet to be created. Go to the auth service, and I'm going to add one more public API over here called logout. And logout is nothing but a simple logout function provided to us by AngularFire auth service, and just say sign out, and that's it. Once you call this function, the user which is logged in currently gets removed from the local storage of your browser. Inside the local storage, you can see AngularFire has created this Firebase key, and it gets simply removed, and also it notifies the Firebase console that user is logged out. All right, I'm just going to refresh, and if I hit logout, okay, oh, I'm so sorry, I did not implement the function, and I'm just going to add a click and logout. As the user clicks the logout, we call the logout and as well we can redirect the user back to the login page. We can do that, yes. So simply go to the constructor over here and inject private router. As we log out the user, we as well navigate the user to the login page. So this router navigate user will get redirected to the login page. All right, so let's just go back to our home, refresh. Let's assume I am on the post page and I hit the logout button, and the user is null now, and as you can see I'm getting redirected to the login page now. Let's log in again. Instead of adding a correct password, I'm going to enter a wrong password. Let's see what happens. Okay, it alerted the password is invalid and the user does not have a password. So let's enter a correct password now and try to log in. Hooray, it works. And it's the happiest moment in our life. So authentication is working perfectly fine over here. And so what we learned today is log in with Google and as well log in with email and password. And we also learned how to create a user auth state. So stay tuned to my channel, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my videos. This is really going to motivate me because in my day-to-day life I'm working as a JavaScript developer as a full-time job, and I have to take out the time to create these videos. A little bit of sharing the love, share my videos, subscribe to my channel. It's going to really boost my confidence. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.